What do you think? Seem to have stabilized at 43. Reveal, are you good to go?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
No worries. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to provide the same update as we did to our employees this afternoon. And some of the messages will also be repetitive for those of you that were part of the student athlete athletic department call last evening. So apologies for the repetition if you were, for whatever reason, part of either of those calls, more likely last night. First, the latest numbers. We picked up at the entry point, and for entry, just like most campuses in New York, we adopted the new New York State guidelines, where 2 negative tests, students coming in by and large with a negative test, at least 3 days of quarantining, and then another negative test on campus got you to the point of taking classes in person and being in interactions on campus. So we were able to screen 17 positives through that approach. A number of those tested positive before they ever came to campus, so they just remained in isolation until they returned. Then the following week, which ended on February 5th, Friday, we picked up a total of 26 cases, including 12 on that Friday. And through tracing, we found that the lion's share came from 2 parties the preceding weekend. 85% plus involved student athletes, and that's the importance of holding the meeting with our student athletes and coaches, because it jeopardizes the ability to do sports later in the season. So we went into pause when we had that upward spike. Last week, we had 19 total cases, so we were starting to see a decline. And we found out some subtleties too in these tests that we had 3 cases where we double counted. Somebody was part of a positive pool as part of the midweek testing. Then they went into the reflex testing to find out who among the 12 was positive. But they also came down with symptoms, showed up at the wellness center and tested positive in that case. So we're counting them positive through 2 different approaches. And so Michael and his team, Michael Kozlowski and his team, have had to adjust the record keeping in that regard. We right now have 41 active cases on campus. 41 total cases in our community, 26 on campus, 15 off campus, they're isolating. And then in quarantine, 22 on campus, 27 off campus. We were able to double quarantine isolation capacity, not easy decisions in terms of asking some of our students to move either at the end of last semester or over the break, but we felt in light of the experience in the fall that it was the best of 2 worst options. So right now we're okay on quarantining isolation space, but we keep on trying to identify more space and just watching the matter closely. And I'll come back as to why that's important to us. The real aha that we had last week, because we heard from a number of you, why don't we switch going online? And that was the norm if you had a spike of at least 100 cases in a 14-day period. We just, there were New York State guidelines were flexibly, you've got to go online, quit all extracurricular activities. So it wasn't even a choice that you could make. You were mandated by the state. The first 2 weeks, there wasn't that state mandate. Because SUNY was onboarding their students, a number of their campuses have had quite a few positive cases. I think Geneseo has had at least 150 as of yesterday. But the aha was this, through talking with colleagues in our own campus analysis, we hadn't been able to find a case where the virus had been transmitted in a classroom setting. So people are wearing masks, socially distanced, and in economics, I'm an economist, there's this concept called opportunity cost. So you're always looking, what's your next best option? So why follow one branch when you have other choices, and what's the next best one that you should be considering? And so in the case of in-person learning, we thought, well, we could take a break for 2 weeks, have students take classes from their dorms or at home. But we know from pedagogical perspectives that that isn't the favored approach, either by our faculty or by our students. And number two, it's also likely to be less safe. You're less likely to be wearing a mask in your residence hall room. You're less likely to be wearing a mask at home. So on net, it's safer if we can gather together in person for online learning. And we reached the conclusion, let's keep doing that as long as possible. That insight led us to the same conclusion when it came time to reopening our gym yesterday, McLean. We had students that were going to Hornell that had bought Y memberships. So they were commuting there to work out, and you're mixing with people that aren't part of your bubble. You're less likely to be wearing masks than you are when you're exercising in McLean. So for similar rationale and opportunity cost-based approach, we just decided it's better to open up the McLean Center and just make sure we're practicing safety protocols. What we haven't done is gone off the pause. So we were feeling pretty good this weekend that we're on the downslide. And then lo and behold, yesterday on Monday, we picked up 12 positive cases, walk-ins, by and large from the Wellness Center. And very much half of them student athletes. So we think they're still either a holdover from the parties a couple weekends before, or maybe from some Super Bowl watching the weekend before, and largely confined to the 4th Street apartments. So our staff has been doing a fair bit of tracing to see if everything we can bring to bear to contain where these cases are occurring. But in light of the uptick, we decided to stay in pause on extracurricular activities where you're less likely to mask. So grab and go dining remains the norm, at least until Friday. And athletics are on pause, and gatherings and student affairs are on pause until at least this Friday. We're going to keep monitoring the number of positives we have. Today, apparently just one. We did over 300 tests in Susan Howell Hall. We'll be doing a like number tomorrow. So we'll monitor those results and then see who else shows up as a positive through both routes. The wrinkle that's now come back into play is New York State has said we're going to stick with our 14-day, we'll specify the 14-day period. If you have 100 cases and a 5% or more positivity rate, then you're mandated to go online and quit extracurricular activities. And so that next 14-day period started on Saturday. So far over that stretch, we've accumulated 13 cases. The positivity rate, thanks to the insight of a coach this afternoon, we'd actually been measuring it incorrectly. So the positivity rate needs to be measured across the entire campus population, employees as well as students. And apparently doesn't matter whether you're taking classes online or in person. The way we'd historically been measuring it, it had been the number of positives relative to the number of tests in any given week. And our most recent positivity rate before today was 4.8%. But with this insight from Mike Moskowitz, our women's basketball coach, it's going to go to no more than 2.4%, and then it'll get driven down further because of the extensive testing this week. And that's something we're going to work with our county Department of Health to see if there's a way to relax that constraint, because the 100 applies no matter how many campus members you have, how large your campus is, how often you're testing. And right now the state hasn't shown any give, so we're pretty much stuck to following that until we can convince authorities otherwise. The other wrinkle is the last 2 weeks we've got a public unit, a statutory college, the New York State College of Ceramics. It's in its 121st year. We get $8.6 million in funding from the state annually. And we received a recent grant for $1.7 million to do glass recycling from the state. We have $15.4 million coming our way for a McMahon building project. We recently redid Harder Hall, about $8 million from the state. And we're anticipating another $7 million for a new foundry distributed boiler project on campus. We heard from the new SUNY chancellor. We're technically not part of SUNY, but one of his platforms is 100% testing weekly of everybody. Negotiate with the unions on the faculty staff side, students, get us close to 100. For a while, we proposed back saying, look, we want to treat everybody equally. We're one university, and we don't want to be testing folks affiliated with the statutory college at a different rate than the non-statutory folks or students. And we got back a very pointed reply last Thursday, just saying no go. That this is something we want to see for the foreseeable future. So we've had to adapt. It's one of the strings that comes with lower tuition for in-state students, for New York State Ceramics College, and even for out-of-state historically students for the Ceramics College. That we decided we don't want to get whacked. Jim Malatras, the new chancellor, is close friends with Governor Cuomo. When it comes time to negotiating the budget, we don't want to be the place sticking out, and as a result, suffer from the opportunities that we provide our students and our ability to retain and develop faculty and staff. So Michael and his team and testing team have been working out the logistics. We are going to be phasing in this week. We're especially testing both athletes and New York State Ceramics College students. We're going to be from 2 days a week, probably ramping up to 2.5 days a week as soon as next week. So stay tuned in that regard. And again, we'll work with your schedules. If we're trying to anticipate when you have classes as students, but to also make sure we provide you the opportunity to get tested if there's a class conflict or a work conflict. And then last thing we've been designated a vaccination site. We heard this maybe 6 weeks ago, but until last week, no assurance of when vaccines would show up. The pharmacy in Alfred has been distributing vaccines through the 1B category. So instructors are eligible to apply, individuals over the age of 65. And more of our faculty staff in those categories have either been getting vaccinated there or traveling to places, whether it's the Holodome in Rochester or even some to Potsdam, New York, depending. It's not been the most coordinated system. A lot of time spent searching for an opportunity, but we're making some progress in the number of employees that are getting vaccinated. Then all of a sudden last week, we found out from the state that we're going to ship you 100 vaccines as of this week, and you have to apply them to individuals, students, faculty, or staff with comorbidities. So individuals, regardless of age, that have issues like asthma, diabetes, heart conditions, and we will distribute a list to Student Senate and also send out something more broadly. So we thought as soon as this Thursday and Friday, we would be able to begin vaccinating. We're the only designated site for comorbidities in the community. So the stipulation from the state that came with it was you also have to be mindful of the community. So Alfred State, as well as our village. And Kim Geyer and Michael Kozlowski have been in some initial discussions with counterparts there, because the safer Alfred State is, it's less likely to bite us on the behind or the village, and vice versa. And they're willing, Alfred State, to administer these vaccines at their own sites. And then lo and behold, late this afternoon, we found out from the state, sorry, you're not going to get your 100 doses this week, reapply for next week. So we're going to keep our oar in the water. And anyway, I still anticipate for students that don't have comorbidities, you're going to have to attest that I've got asthma, that I've got a heart condition to qualify for a vaccine. We don't think people will need doctor's notes, but you will need that attestation, just like our faculty have to attest that they're instructors. So stay tuned in that regard. And as more vaccines get produced, younger folks, students are lower in the queue right now. They're less at risk, but the sooner we can get you vaccinated as well, or at least offer you that opportunity, the better. And then we'll just share what we shared with the students. Most of the cases we had in the fall were asymptomatic or minor symptoms. We've had a few students with pretty severe symptoms. this term. Nobody that had to be hospitalized, but somebody that ran 104-degree fever. An ambulance came. His oxygen level was okay, so the advice from the medics was, you're just as well isolating here, and we'll keep monitoring you for symptoms so long as your oxygen level is okay. I have a student in my own common ground section who said it's for 5 days, it's the worst headache that he's ever had in his life, and it was pretty painful. We had another student that said, we don't wish this on anybody. So in a perverse way, we hope that first and foremost, everybody stays safe, which they have. We haven't had to hospitalize anybody, but that people are especially careful. We have variants now that are out there that are more transmissible, and some preliminary evidence that they also may be more capable of causing serious illness. So we'll keep monitoring that. And I guess something I shared with the employees this afternoon, cautiously optimistic that we're starting to move to a herd immunity through a combination of the bad way and the good way. The bad way is when people have contracted COVID, and at least for 3 months, supposedly that keeps you from getting reinfected. I was on a call late today with some fellow presidents in the Rochester area. There have been a couple cases where people were reinfected. They were positive in the spring and again infected this semester. So that's something that we're still trying to, and scientists are trying to track down, how much immunity does contracting COVID confer. Vaccinations, about 12% of the US population now has received at least one dose. It confers substantial immunity, 80% plus. The second dose boosts that further, and it seems to have more staying power than when you've contracted COVID naturally. We know from several studies that there are probably more people that have had COVID than have tested positive. Quite a few people are asymptomatic, or at least early on didn't get tested when they might have suspected it was a cold or seasonal flu. And so that helps with herd immunity to the extent that immunity has staying power. And then what also helps us from a human behavior point of view, the people that are more risk loving were probably out there congregating more readily. And so that fuels the pandemic early on. But then you exhaust basically the kindling, because more and more of those people have gone through COVID. And at the same time, I know at least several people in my friendship circle who haven't shopped, believe it or not, since last March. So then they're very risk averse people that are just not circulating. And that, in a sense, also helps you, beyond vaccinations, get to herd immunity, so long as those people keep practicing those approaches. So as you might have seen the last few days, we've had I think it's 60 and then 59,000 daily cases. It's come down throughout the United States dramatically since late December. The positive testing rate has been cut in over half since December, but it's still, we're indoors, it's still winter, it's still a pretty high rate. It isn't the 1% positivity we saw last summer. And vaccines are still taking a while, and therapeutics to make their impact felt. So let me stop there, thrown a lot at you, and see what questions you have.
I'm not sure if everyone knows that questions will need to be asked instead of entered into the chat. So if you do have questions, please feel free to ask them.
So they could unmute themselves and just ask.
I think so. Is that correct, Mari?
Yes, they can now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mari.
I just had a quick question about why we're not getting the email updates like we did in the beginning of the year and last semester.
We switched to just daily updating them on the COVID-19 dashboard. So if you just type in Alfred, we decided it'd be better not to snow you with the daily emails. So if you just look on Alfred University COVID-19 dashboard and bookmark it, you'll get the most up to the minute information. And then you can look under the total positive cases that are active. It'll list by day when the positives occur, going back through early January. So, and part of, we think the parties, complacency can be our own worst enemy. We had a really good fall relative to a lot of places that sent students home or switched fully online. So it's sometimes success is your own worst enemy, and you think you're invincible. And sometimes we've all made mistakes. So how do we forgive? How do we learn? The important thing is to learn and make sure we stay safe.
Mark, a follow-up to that, if I could. The dashboard is usually updated somewhere between 7 and 9 each night. And the reason it's updated so late is because we factor in the tests that or the test results we received from the Wellness Center. And generally the pool test results and the reflex test results that we get back from SUNY Upstate that does all of our lab work. It usually comes in somewhere between 8 and 9 at night. So it's a good idea to check the COVID-19 dashboard site after that time each night.
And right now we're still relying on reflex testing. So positive pools, Upstate Medical Center then digs into the 12 who's positive. It's been taken between 24, usually 24 hours, but there have been a couple days last week where it was 48 hours. We purchased something called a Cepheid System, like the constellation for the astronomers in the group. We have the machine, but we're waiting for the kits. This thing's in high demand across the country. And what that'll allow us to do, as soon as we get a positive pool, quickly invite in the 12 so you don't have to quarantine, but we can more quickly find out who's positive. And then if you're not positive, you can go about life in the normal way, as opposed to 24 hours or 48 hours of being in limbo. So those kits can't come quickly enough. And then we'll put in a plug for our student affairs staff, and especially to ask for student leadership and student help. They've been burning the midnight oil a lot. Almost sometimes have this visual of being a general in an olden day battle where your troops were going into battle, but you couldn't really shape the outcome, and with the onslaught they were facing, whether they would hold up. We've had a lot of positives to deal with, way more than we had through the entire fall. So residence life, public safety, student conduct, athletics, our testing team too, Kim in her role. So it's the more for each other and also for them, so we don't burn them out. A special plea to both recognize them and that we thank them for the good work they're doing, but be mindful of that important work on our behalf. It's not easy.
CJ, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I just got a quick question about how the dashboard is determined. Yesterday, when I had still yet to reload the page, it showed 35 resolved cases. This morning when I reloaded the page, it then showed 27 resolved cases, and only until just recently it continued to show that. I was just wondering how the numbers are determined, because they've been wildly inconsistent and not linear like you would expect. Sometimes they go down suddenly and then come right back up.
Michael, do you want to tackle that?
Sure. Yeah. There's a high degree of variability in the dashboard data, principally because we have what I like to refer to as inflow and outflow each day. So for example, today we had 20 students who are going out of quarantine and isolation. We have, as a result of today's testing, I believe 4 are going into quarantine as a result. Kim can check me on those numbers. So throughout the day, we have that inflow and outflow that's occurring to us. And then at night, we try and balance it all and insert it into the dashboard. Overnight, sometimes late, we get a set of results from SUNY Upstate, which alters the whole balance that we had kept or maintained until that point. So that is an unfortunate problem with managing a dashboard like that. It is the fact that we have big numbers going in and we have big numbers coming out at times. Today, Mark mentioned we did 352 tests with SUNY. So tomorrow night at 8 or 9 o'clock, we're going to get some number of positive pools back. I hope we don't, but if we do, every positive pool results in 12 people going into precautionary quarantine. So hopefully that explains why it's so variable. What we try and look at as an indicator of how we're doing is what are our active cases at any given point. And that gives us, I think, the best insight as to how the campus is doing. Did that help with an answer, CJ?
And CJ, there's another important point, because the resolved cases should be going up. Regardless.
Right, but earlier the resolved cases suddenly went down, which you would not expect to see.
Correct. So that glitch, we've got to check into why that's occurring, because with time, as people get better, that number should steadily be going up. The isolation and quarantining numbers will vary, can go up and down due to inflows and outflows, but the successfully resolved cases should be going uniformly up. So thanks for noticing that, and we'll check into it, CJ.
And I believe we're at the end of our time. I don't know if there's anyone that has one last remaining question.
I have a question.
Sure.
My question is, what are you guys doing to help the students' mental health? Because basically by us not being able to go get dinner, you're telling us that we can't hang out with our friends and we can't like hang out in social gatherings. So I don't understand what you guys are doing to combat our mental health declining, because by us just sitting in the same four walls, that is leading, especially with the winter, it's leading to cabin fever and depression. And I think the last thing you guys want is a student to commit suicide because they couldn't hang out with their friends because we were stuck because of COVID.
Kim or Tamara, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah. Tamara's talking, but she's on mute. Do you want to go first, Tamara?
Yeah. Piper, I think there's 2 points to that. One, we have taken that into consideration, and this semester we're doing much more to stay in daily contact with our students in isolation and quarantine. We've had weekly conversations about when can we have more students able to gather, looking at possibly changing the guest policy, but until we see a decrease in the positive infection rate, we need to err on the side of caution. Certainly, if you're able to meet in a small group in a very open area, I strongly encourage you to do that, to meet up with your friends. We understand how difficult it is to be in your room, especially during winter. It's a difficult time, but we really are trying our best to offer activities, whether that be through Zoom or very small meetings where people can be safe wearing their masks. So I think we are really trying to do our best. If you have specific suggestions, I am all ears as to how we can assist students in not having that cabin fever.
Yeah, I would just add that our Office of Student Activities and Residence Life offices have been planning virtual activities. We've passed out puzzles and coloring books to students in quarantine and isolation to try to help give them something to do in addition to taking their courses during that time. And I actually had a student, I won't call her out, but she suggested this in a different call tonight. The video chats with family and friends has made a world of difference for her. So if you're not doing that regularly, you might want to try that. I know we're all on Zoom a lot, but with family and friends, that might help. And then the other thing that we've done, we've tried to have various check-ins, again through Zoom, with students who are in quarantine and isolation. We want to check in and make sure they're doing okay and hear from them, but we haven't had a lot of turnout for those calls. So if you have suggestions and you want to email Dr. Kenny or myself about how we might be able to help and stay connected with our students in that situation, please let us know. And Dr. Kenny, if I'm not mistaken, I think we've also had the counseling center try to connect with students through some sessions through Zoom and in the evenings or when students are in quarantine and isolation. So through different settings, and we haven't gotten a good turnout to those either in some cases. So again, if you have suggestions, we would welcome those by email.
Kim, do you want to mention the community friends?
Oh,
And-
sure. Yeah. Tamara, do you want to talk about that? Because I know you've worked more closely with them.
Sure. There's a group of faculty and community members that are working on right now getting more supplies that can be delivered to students in isolation or quarantine. They're also working on connecting students with people in the community as kind of a touchstone for them. I believe they have 23 matches already. So it's just folks that you can call and ask questions to, or if you don't have a car, maybe they would help you get to Wegmans to get what you need to get. So they're pretty active, and this is a new program that they've put together. Like I said, they're also working on doing some drives for some food and some other items that we can be handing out to students in isolation and quarantine. So I think it's a really cool idea. I think next fall, hopefully when COVID is over, we'll see much more connection with that group. And the first year students, I think, is where we're going to really target. But any student who's looking for a community friend can certainly reach out to myself or Gail Gephardt, a community friend.
Well, it looks like we're over our time, President Zupan. So I don't know if you want to call it now and ask that if anyone else has remaining questions, if they could reach out to Dr. Kenny or myself.
Mhm.
And if we can't answer them, we'll connect you.
And we're all reachable by email, and we're all available to set up a Zoom call. It feels like Groundhog Day at times, where you just, especially during these winter months, if you've ever seen the movie with Bill Murray, and it's not easy. It's not easy, but we appreciate all your fortitude, and it's been energizing personally to teach 2 classes this term, just to have the chance to interact with students. People appreciate being in the classroom as best we could tell, and it's also some solidarity on the faculty staff side to see people just going about the day-to-day stuff that we didn't know what this roller coaster ride would look like when we started in the fall. Now we've got a better appreciation of how we deal with cases, but it's still, it's not the way we want to go about life for the long run. And the sooner we can get beyond this, the better. So I hope we'll take faith in the declining positive numbers and positive cases and the growing vaccinations and therapeutics. I'm an optimist by nature, but we gotta keep the faith and keep protecting the Lux in the meanwhile. And thank you for all you're doing collectively in that regard.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.